a thing I came across the other day that I actually thought was really fascinating. And of course, it came across as a clickbait headline of, the biggest AI Black Swan event is about to hit the world and disrupt everything we ever knew about computing. And in the thumbnail or something like that, there was this little, like, I don't know, I've got like a Mac mini. It's smaller than that. It looks like a little USB hard drive. Honestly, the picture of it looked about like this, right? Like just a little charge pack. And it said, this has all the power of an Amazon data center right here. And I saw it and I went, what is this? Because this was what it was proclaiming the Black Swan event was that this new advancement that they have discovered is going to radically change the way we do digital processing, digital computing. And so I looked into it. I did some more research on what exactly it is, and what they're really talking about, and how are they making such a proclamation about, what this is. So I'm just going to share with you a little bit about what it is, the real world implications of it, because I think it is extremely disruptive. And I actually think we're already seeing indications that there is truth behind this and people are figuring it out. But it's not going to be quite the Black Swan event that I think many might think. Now, if you know, I'm not going to explain what a Black Swan event, but let me just say it's extremely disruptive to an industry, like completely blindsides and changes the entire course of something. And nobody saw it coming. So essentially what the claim behind this is that when you think about computing, there is the I/O, or the data transfer, and then there's the computing, the processing. And as you look at a lot of like SaaS, software as a solution, I think that's right, or PaaS, platforms as a solution, you see these massive data centers. And so what's happening is there's a lot of time wasted from when you need it to do something, and then the time it takes to transmit that data, and then the processor itself like completes it. And then there's a lot of travel time in between. I mean, that's really the essence of it. The IO CPU difference, the breakdown is just not there. And so there's a lot of waste in the processing power, because the computer, largely the CPU, is just sitting there going, waiting for the next instruction, waiting for the next instruction. And then it finally gets one, and boom, in the blink of an eye, at the speed of light, it does its calculation, it does its computation, and then it says, here you go, here's order fulfilled. And then it's got to travel back. And then it's sitting there, twiddling its thumbs, waiting for the next thing. And then the next thing comes through and boom, it does this. And so in theory, the theory goes that if you could somehow better anticipate what is going to need to be processed before it needed to be processed, or, close that gap, you could, in theory, close the gap and get exponential compute power out of the technology we have today, without having to build massive data centers, without having to consume massive amounts of electricity, all this stuff. Now, a good example of this, all right, just a good example of this is if you think about how Apple and its iPhone has really worked to put, in a lot of devices now are looking to put AI capable chips on the device. A large part of that is to try and address this same issue, so that rather than, you putting in a prompt into ChatGPT and then having to send this stuff out and then wait for, its queue and then get processed and then get shot back, you can just go, well, let's like do it on device. And we cut that travel time down significantly, which improves performance, all this stuff. And so in theory, and what this company that, has these claims, and I looked into some of their stuff, and it seems like they've actually really done some good stuff. They've shown that they actually can do this, which again, we can sit and argue if this is possible or not. I've looked into the arguments against it. I get it. You're kind of saying like, well, how do we eliminate all inefficiency out of the system? But the reality is there is tons, 90% of the work of a traditional computer is waste. It's just literally moving data from memory and storage, taking it out of memory, taking it out of storage, moving it around. That's where 90% of the effort goes, only 10%. And so that IO bottleneck is huge. And so you see, look around, you see what we're doing to try and close that bottleneck. And traditionally, the way we've done it is to, you build bigger and more powerful data centers. You build heavier resources, more power hungry tools that do all this stuff. Instead of saying, what if we just built a more efficient machine? What if we took that 90% to 50%? What kind of gains could we get out of our existing hardware today that would actually, or how much more efficiently could we run with all this stuff? And this is the black swan event, is that they've cracked this. There are people now that have cracked this and have completely eliminated, and that's where I kind of roll my eyes and go, you've eliminated the inefficiency? I don't think you've eliminated the efficiency, but you might have greatly reduced it. And so if that's really the case, if we've removed this redundancy, if we've removed this inefficiency, this could be a major breakthrough. Now, the reason they're claiming this means that, we aren't going to have any data centers is they're saying you're not going to need them. You're not going to need a data center, because rather than working with a PaaS or a SaaS and, working with Amazon to host all your stuff, you won't need it. You're just going to have a tiny little box sitting in a room somewhere that, does everything. Now, to the people who go, that's ridiculous. I mean, if you think about computers, there was a time when computers were the size of gymnasiums to do very basic computations. And now we have devices on our wrists that are infinitely more powerful than that. So to say that's never going to happen, I think is foolish, in the sense that it's like, well, no, I mean, I think we're going to be able to become more efficient, which is going to be great because we need to. If you followed me for long, I talk a lot about the fact that the inefficiency and the drain on the system and the power and the environmental implications of the stuff we're doing is terrible, absolutely terrible. So this could be a massive innovative breakthrough. What I don't like about it, though, is this claim that it's like, this is the end of data centers. However, if you watch the news, there are a lot of these big companies that are scaling back big time their data center stuff. If at the end of 2024, everybody was like, there's going to be a data center everywhere. We're going to have these things built all over. And all of a sudden now people aren't building data centers. All of a sudden now, we're holding on this. We're not going to have that anymore. And I think it's largely due to this efficiency that we're seeing here, that the big industry, the big players are picking up on and going, hey, before we spend billions of dollars building massive data centers that are going to be extremely expensive to maintain, extremely expensive to staff, let's maybe check into this first. So I think there are some legitimate indications that this isn't just a red herring, if you will. And so I'm interested to see how this progresses. Where I don't think it's going to be quite what they are saying is data centers and all of this stuff aren't only in place because of inefficiency. I mean, companies have always had their on-prem things. And yes, the cloud dramatically changed that because they couldn't scale. And so you had to go to these big players to have massive data centers that you could just pull from because it was more stable. So is there a world where, similar to iPhones having AI chips on them to do more of the AI processing right on device instead of having to do everything through a data center, could a change like this encourage that? Yes. Do I think some of these big plans, so if you're investing tons of stock in data center, construction, or you're building a company in data center manufacturing, you might want to reconsider your plans, because I think this is going to put a serious dent in where everybody thought this was going. But I don't think it eliminates it. The claim, we're never going to have a data center. Once we do this, there's just going to be computers on everybody's desks. The problem is silos are super inefficient. And a large part of the reason companies moved to the cloud was because there was so much benefit from the scalability and, all this other stuff. So is it possible that the big players might say, we can cut down on our stuff? Yeah, I think so. But the demand is just going to grow. I mean, just think about back when computers first came out, people were like, the only people who are going to need this is NASA and big government. Like, come on, really? Like, that's not how it works. We just continue to expand with the demand. So if this works, might it change the way we go about it? Yes. Is it going to probably significantly disrupt some of the things that everybody was saying were for sure going to happen in 2025? Yeah. Does this solve potentially some of the major inefficiency problems that we have with computing as we know it today, where we go, oh no, like our technology, we've got some, is like, as an example, is quantum computing the only way we're going to be able to achieve the kind of horsepower we need to do the work we do? Maybe not. If we clean up this IO CPU problem and go from 90% efficiency to 5% inefficiency, that's infinitely more computation power than we could have ever imagined. So might that be enough to solve some of these problems? Might it make things way better without having to have a steampunk chandelier in your dining room to be able to run things? Yeah. And if you look at the trajectory of technology, that's a very natural progression. So that's the big black swan event. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. It's definitely not one I had considered. I really hadn't. And actually, as I dug into it, I really had not considered and thought about how inefficient our processing and data transfer is right now. And I went, oh, that's actually really smart. So in some ways, this company that's talking about this did exactly what Microsoft did and said, instead of just looking at building more powerful processors, bigger data centers, all these other things, maybe we just try and squeeze more out of the same thing, which is brilliant, and can have some massive implications on things. Now, when this will come to market, I guess we'll see what happens.